what are false flags? And it does seem to be that there are a lot of false flags happening currently, or at least a lot of talk about false flags. That's what we're going to talk about in this video. Hey, Matt, thank you so much for making yourself available. I
Hey,
shall
Rick.
have, hey, I shall have the links where people can find you in the description below.
Okay.
But false flags. So I start a war by doing something, making out that you did it. Like I punch myself in the face and then it's alleged that you did that, Matt. And then that justifies me fighting you.
That's a that's a simple that's the recipe made as simple as possible. That's how it works.
That's right.
Yeah.
Matt, what you punch me for?
Yeah.
Okay,
Um,
so why are we even talking about false flags?
well, I think it's an opportune time to do so because we are seeing across the board in the media of Europe as well as of North America a lot of signal coming out from the left and from right-wing media alike, warning of an increased danger of false flag or not false flag, sorry, of terrorist incidents, not false flag. They're warning of increased likelihood of Iranian sleeper cells coming out to strike America in asymmetrical warfare ways that have been lurking under the shadows waiting to strike. And now is the moment in revenge and retaliation for the bombings that have been going on for 2 weeks. We also have, U.S. embassies in, I guess it was Copenhagen that caught fire. There's other things like that that are creating a climate of tension. And I think it's good that we have this conversation now because a lot of people are still a little bit confused about what the hell is this thing that we've been living in for so many decades now, especially since September the 11th, terrorism, foreign and domestic. Is it a naturally occurring phenomenon? How are societies corralled to go along with and support wars of destruction of empire? Why do we go along with that? Why did we go along with freedom fries? You're right.
Yep. We have to say this.
Mm.
I have to say this anyway, otherwise I'm going to get in the comments. 9/11 was a false flag.
That's a great example. And if people haven't discovered that yet at this point in 2026, get out of the rock, get the rock from off your head, get it. And there's some documentaries, Loose Change, Codex 9/11. Codex 9/11 actually is a recent documentary made by a friend of mine named Brad Zerbo. 2 hours long. I've seen hundreds of these sorts of documentaries. The architects of engineers for 9/11 Truth have done 25 years of fantastic research debunking it scientifically, mechanically. This documentary that I just referenced goes through the most full spectrum analysis, taking into consideration every possible aspect of how that false flag was created that you could imagine,
Hmm.
from the Project for a New American Century, the Carlyle Group, to controlled demolition science, to the extreme degree of 2 buildings or 3 buildings can't go down because of 2 planes, doesn't work, and more. There's so many layers to this, but it's a give yourself the gift. If you are watching this and you don't know it yet, give yourself the gift of that discovery because it changes everything about how
Yep.
you look at it.
And
And
I just got to say that on my old channel, I actually did an interview with Richard Gage
oh, you did.
on 9/11, false flag 9/11. And I remember at the time when it happened, they found the passports a day or so later.
Yeah.
Everything else got incinerated, but these passports just made out of the most amazing material.
Yeah, I know. Hey, the teeth, the bones, every piece of evidence of the people on the planes, all of that's gone forever. But these passports just made it out perfectly okay
Only
above
those
the.
passports as well. And
Yeah, yeah,
and then other incidents like I think 7/7 in London. These terrorists that did that, they were so careless. They left their passports in the street bin. Can you believe that?
sloppy, so sloppy for high level terrorists that could do these things. Eh? Yeah, so it's obviously like there's enough clues to indicate that we're being lied to by the official narratives, but not enough people have the confidence in themselves and I guess the courage to deal with the consequence of the truth that they choose to instead hold on to the warm blanket of the
Mm.
the the popular narratives given to us to explain away the problem that it's not nothing is the fault is not ours that any of these bad things are happening. It has nothing to do with what we've allowed to encroach upon our policymaking circles that have somehow any ties to the murder of John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr. or any of that. It all has to do with people in caves who hate our freedoms and want to kill us because they hate our freedoms. How satisfying of an answer is that? Um, so anyway, my fear is
I hate
that
those people. They're so free. I'll just kill them.
it's pretty, yeah, I think Hollywood did a lot to like oversimplify good and evil to some absurd cartoonish degree that we all kind of are. We're so trained to want to be the good guys in the Rambo
Mm.
movie that we fall prey to these
But
types of simplistic narratives.
but Matt,
Yeah.
I don't think it's Hollywood. I think that's human being. Because you and I, we have our own soap operas, like office politics.
Yes.
And I find in those narratives, whichever narrative I find myself in, I'm always the goody.
That's true. That's good. We want to be good. Even Plato proved, right, in his dialogues that nobody wants to wake up to do evil. You do evil for reasons that have more to do with unexamined, not having examined the motives, the heart, the mind. And if you don't know yourself, then you might become an instrument for something that actually does your soul a lot of damage and you don't even know it
Mm.
because you think that you're getting gratification, you're getting fame, you're getting riches. And so you might fool yourself into thinking that whatever you're doing must be good because look at how much people like you, you're popular, you got money, but actually you're doing damage to your deeper divine self by virtue of not using your conscience, not using the reason that God gave you as an instrument, and you're not using those things well. So, it's an important exercise here. That being said, false flags. So yeah, that was one example. And as we could do another example, you and I recently did an interview where we brought up the Reichstag fire. The Nazis burnt down, as we discovered later on, their own parliament building, blamed it on the Jews and the commies in order to unify the German people around the idea that a foreign threat, an invisible, shadowy threat, wants to get you. And so we got to give up our liberties to secure freedom. And, a Fuhrer was there to provide that answer for us. And as a consequence, we got the rise of the Thousand Year Reich agenda.
Mm.
Now,
Also, 10/7, recent false flag, where
that's,
Palestinian terrorists or Hamas were able to traverse the Israeli border, the most secure border in the world, undetected for about 7 hours.
yep.
And then what was the downing of a ship that allowed the US to participate in Vietnam War? I forget the
Well, that
name of the
actually
ship.
didn't even happen, but that was called the Gulf of Tonkin incident, where Americans were told that the Viet Cong of Ho Chi Minh had struck an American naval ship in the Gulf of Tonkin, which actually never happened, but all of our media told us it did, and that created a charged Pearl Harbor like energy moment where people said, okay, we have to now forget what JFK was saying about trying to extricate ourselves from a war we have no business being in, which is what JFK was trying to do. He even had a national security study memorandum published calling for the extraction of troops and phased such that by 1964 there would be no more troops advising anybody in Vietnam. And the American people were dumb enough to believe what the media was telling them. They gave their support and consent to now an acceleration of new troops into Vietnam. The fact
Wow.
that Jim
So,
Morrison's dad was the admiral on that ship is a weird a weird crossover that I don't know how to think about yet.
so, so,
Yeah,
so
go
it was a false flag.
on. False flag. Yeah, yeah, kind of.
Okay, a
And
fake
this all
false flag.
peppers, yeah, this peppers all of our history, right? I mean, going back to even the attack on the Maine that got America into the Spanish-American War in the Philippines. That was an attack that was discovered later on to have been contrived internally by forces loyal to Teddy Roosevelt, who was trying at the time as Undersecretary of the Navy to get the U.S. to become colonial, modeling U.S. foreign policy for the first time on the British Empire, which required getting Americans to consent to something they would never consent to, which was what they were told was, the Spanish in Philippines are attacking our navy on the Maine. It blew up. And so we gave our consent and went in and became a colonial empire, massacring hundreds of thousands of people in the Philippines and really selling our soul in a big way, emulating the British Empire as Teddy Roosevelt had always aspired to and
Wow.
transforming, so that's the case for a and there's many more examples that we could find that whether it was in the case of the Viet Cong as foreign commie terrorists, doing things back then, or whether it was the Weather Underground or the Red Brigades of Italy and of Germany of the 1970s that were planting mailbox bombs and bombs in hospitals and schools and malls to fight imperialism. Of course, these Maoist Leninist terrorist cells were all over Europe.
But those were false flags. That was Operation Gladio.
You
I know
got
because
it.
I recorded an interview with Colonel Towner Watkins who went through it because I remember what was happening in Italy in the 70s. Not that I'm that old, but I remember being told about it.
I remember being told about it too.
That's right, by my grandfather.
Yeah, that's right. It was called the Years of Lead, and it was run by CIA, MI6, unreconstructed Nazis and Italian fascists and French fascists to oversee the creation of these synthetic terrorist cults that would then be deployed to create an atmosphere of fear in the population, who, in a time during the Cold War, would be more inclined to run into the warm, comforting embrace of their radicalizing right-wing governments that were being captured by more and more of these unreconstructed Nazis, right? You got to keep in mind, as Tamara Watkins and also Cynthia has written a book, my wife, on this as well, that not just Gladio and NATO secret armies were being run by these high-level SS Nazis and Italian fascists, but even the Reinhard Gehlen network in Germany was set up to run the German Bundeswehr, the German police apparatus, for like 20 years with his entire Gehlen network of thousands of Nazi operatives who were killer operatives assigned to control increasingly the government of Germany and other European governments too. And the way that they did that was you convince people that commie, Maoist, Leninist terrorists are out to get you all the time, every day. And we had this in Quebec with the FLQ, the Front de Libération de Québec, which were also planting years upon years of mailbox bombs to somehow protest imperialism. That's you're gonna like
Blow up a
try to
mailbox.
kill civilian. But that what it did do is it gave rise to people who then believed that it was the only way to solve the problem was tanks on the street, martial law in Quebec, and for a month, Quebec was locked down in October 1970 with the Canadian Army controlling Quebec with curfews, political opponents who were resisting this kind of technocratic regime change of our governance structures were eliminated, like Pierre Laporte, the deputy minister of Quebec, was the person who was kidnapped and strangled ritualistically in the same way that later on Aldo Moro of Italy was also killed. The prime minister who was trying to end the Cold War strategy of tension in Italy was killed in a very similar way. In
Wow.
the this strategy was applied in the form of both the Weather Underground terrorists that were all over the United States, that later on some of the leaders gave rise and sponsored the success of Barack Obama, like Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dohrn, who were the earliest sponsors of Barack Obama's political career, but also things like COINTELPRO, that was run by J. Edgar Hoover as a project of the FBI, which was done to send infiltrators into the civil rights movement and the different black power movements and black nationalist movements and communist movements and union movements in order to radicalize them and turn them violent, especially, as we saw with the efforts to infiltrate the Black Panthers and the moderates who were actually able to understand this and call out the FBI's hands in radicalizing these groups to kill Whitey instead of like actually having a competent strategy.
Hmm.
They were like Fred Hampton was killed. He was eliminated because he was smart in the Black Panthers. And the same thing was done with Hamas, right? Which was proven to be, and Chaz Freeman, the former U.S. ambassador to Saudi Arabia, has given wonderful presentations expounding upon the creation of Hamas as a project of Israeli intelligence in the 1980s as an outgrowth of the Muslim Brotherhood in order to infiltrate and radicalize the Palestinian resistance and break the Palestinian Liberation Organization of Yasser Arafat, which actually had moderate, competent, reasonable people like Arafat who were trying to figure out how do we create a viable two-state solution with economic development beneficial to all. And that had to be eliminated in favor of a more predictable, radicalizable, more violent-prone organization to replace it with, which Yasser Arafat always pointed out was being over the region of Gaza. We have to make sure, speaking to fellow Zionists, that Hamas is going to be in control of and represent the Gaza and nothing but that, which is why he was also overseeing bags full of money going into Hamas's treasure troves. So you got this technique. At the time, it was called COINTELPRO in America in the 1970s. And in England, in Europe, it was called something different. It had different names in different parts of different governments where it was located. But it was always done to keep the people afraid and to organize people in a state of fear, not of hope, not of love or creativity, but in a state of fear where we're not in a creative mode. And then that was just domestic. Now, of
But hold
course,
on, Matt. The other thing that it did, it justified governments extending their own powers, like you said, Hitler did with Kristallnacht. Also, the 9/11,
hmm,
the Patriot Act, which was this massive tome. It was suddenly ready the day after or something. And
yeah.
then I remember in Britain, when lockdown started, in a matter of no time at all, this massive legislation, the Coronavirus Act, was produced. It would have taken months to have written that.
Yeah. So, on that note, the Patriot Act had already been written by Joe Biden and Bruce Reed, a Rhodes Scholar, in 1995 because they had authored something called the Omnibus Crime Bill. Now, I don't think Biden actually authored that, but he was the one who introduced it into legislation as a response to both the Oklahoma City bombing and
Oh.
as well as the first attack on the World Trade Center by these Muslim terrorists that blew up a van in the basement, killed a number of people. Now, what I can definitely say, and I composed this in a recent article, which people can find on my website. Ahmad Salam, who was one of the key FBI informants within that Islamist terrorist cell that did the 1993 bombing in the World Trade Center, he actually had recorded months and months and months of discussions on the phone with his FBI handler. And he was telling him, okay, we have enough information now. It's time for you to stop and end this cell that he has been assigned to manage, because he was the one overseeing the transportation, the bomb making equipment, the instructions. Everything was being provided by Ahmad Salam, a former Egyptian official, or military official, who was brought in to be this person to run the cell. And he was basically saying, "Now is time. We have enough information. You should probably do something." And his handler was telling him every single call, "We'll do something next week. We promise." And he started getting suspicious and started recording hundreds of hours of telephone calls, which he made public and which were published in transcript form, even on the New York Times in 1993, demonstrating that the FBI had been overseeing this entire operation from way earlier. When the omnibus crime bill was passed, it was defeated by in Joe Biden's 1995 days. However, he bragged, and John Ashcroft, the nominal author of the Patriot Act that was done like 2 seconds after 9/11, said that he got everything verbatim from the Biden crime bill, and Biden took pride in that, which created and reinforced the continuity of government strategies to create a parallel government institution outside of the official elected channels that would then be enshrined and empowered to direct the military as well as many intelligence branches in the time of crisis. It was always designed to be something that would keep control in times of crisis, which is why the Patriot Act has been renewed every single year over the next 25 years since it was first enacted, which has been expanding its authorization to now include not just people from abroad who are terrorists, who are told to hate and fear because they hate our freedoms,
Hmm.
but also domestic terrorists of both a left as well as of a right wing variety, of which there's no shortage, cooked up by the same intelligence agencies that brought us those years of lead. And here we have things like Antifa and Black Lives Matter that we saw did so much damage to America in the summer of love. In the wake of the George Floyd murders, something like 40 civilians were killed, and some police. But at the same time, we have enough evidence that we have right wing terrorist groups that have been created by the FBI, like the Patriot Front. Of you see these pictures of these Americans with masks and matching khakis and navy shirts with American shields marching in areas where there's nobody except media photographers on site to showcase this to the left wing media consumers, that this is the face of the American MAGA right.
They, they
Are
are
these guys who are
so
wearing COVID masks?
they are so obviously agents, spooks, security services. They're not. It's not real. There's no way. Absolutely no way. Complete astroturf.
No. Yes. Absolutely. It's such a contrived thing. And I know we have to round out today's show pretty soon, but just to say it's you have even things like the Satanic Order of the Nine Angles and Atomwaffen SS, which is this hard, heavy occult right-wing organization that's been recruiting disenfranchised, economically broken young white men into their camps since at least the 90s, which openly have been found to have been receiving upwards of $200,000 of FBI money. Anthony Caleb Sutter, who's the head of this thing, has been found to have received over $180,000 since 2004 by the FBI to run and manage his entire Atomwaffen SS, as well as the Temple of Blood cult, which is like some weird spin-off from the Anton LaVey and Aquino Temple of Set shit. Like this is like real stuff that has been recruiting again, economically broken, desperate white people who have been broken of their dignity, right? They've no proper sense of history or how anything works, and all they see as hope is the same thing that the young radicalized, broken young Arab man who has watched his family blown up in front of his face, has only lived through injustice and hardship under a very bad situation, is now offered, $100 a week to just be a part of this ISIS organization or ISIS affiliate. And if you blow up in the line of duty, we'll take care of your family. We'll give you
Oh
some money.
God.
We'll give you dignity. We'll give you a cause and a purpose to life, right?
Yeah.
And they don't know where this money's coming from. They don't realize that it's coming from the same channels that Zbigniew Brzezinski oversaw when he created Operation Cyclone in 1979, that created a massive fund of $500 million in 1979 alone to take U.S. taxpayer money to create radicalizing madrasas, to produce Wahhabite brainwashed zombies in order to weaponize Islam and suck in the Soviets into Afghanistan, which is where Al Qaeda comes from, which is what we continue to use and amplify to destabilize Libya through the Libyan Shield that received its support and training and directives from the CIA and Western intelligence, as was discovered even by the Chilquot inquiry, or the Al Nusra Front that became ISIS in Syria, whose leader is now running Syria as Al Julani, who had a bounty of $10 million on his head 2 seconds ago, and now is all of a sudden a cleaned up, rebranded leader of Syria, who's giving access to the Israelis to go and invade Lebanon. This is what Vanessa Beeley has been reporting, has been actually this. There's a weird secret collusion, it seems, underway, or evidence of that, between this ISIS new government that ousted Assad with the help of the West, which Hamas was also backing,
Yes.
right? The
Well,
same
just
Hamas that gave the excuse to Israel to initiate what they've wanted as an acceleration of their greater Israel, and which Iran stood in opposition to, saying, "We'll not let this happen, either the overthrow of Assad or the this expansion," which is why Hamas has been attacking Iran as well since 2013, saying, "You've betrayed us," right?
what a bloody, bloody mess. Absolute
Yeah.
bloody mess that these create. And
Yep.
couple of other things I remembered about false flags are the drills. Like for
Mm.
7/7 in London, there was a drill happening at the same time involving the emergency services. That what if there was a terrorist attack on a tube train? Oh, just as they're doing the drill, there was a terrorist attack on a tube train. And then there was a drill for 9/11. What if some buildings got struck and collapsed? Oh, some buildings got struck and collapsed. It's they just keep and I'm trying to think
Yeah, it's like
there are other
there's others. There's
drills.
there's Dark Winter. There's Dark Winter tabletop exercises in 2000 December, featuring what if Saddam Hussein released weaponized smallpox onto us as an excuse for us to go and invade Iraq before they decided to go with their Twin Towers
WMD.
Pentagon.
Yeah.
Yeah, W. So
And wasn't there
events.
I forget the name, there was an exercise in October 2019, a tabletop exercise, a drill, that if there were a global pandemic, what would all the agencies do? I mean, we were
Yeah,
really
there's
fortuitous,
Cyber
Matt,
Polygon,
because
right?
no, we were
Go
really,
on.
really
Yeah.
fortuitous that they had that just in time, and therefore they were able to save all of humanity because they'd just been
Yeah,
practicing
thank God.
saving all of humanity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, what a fortunate thing, right? A weaponized coronavirus being sprung on us, and they were ready right in time. I know. Or
That's
now cyber polygon as well, right? That's another one that they're going to be hopefully very ready for of cyber terrorists shutting down our grids in order to initiate a collapse of the system and a reset of the system. Now they're ready for that, and I'm sure it won't happen. Or if it does,
yeah.
our leaders will know what to do.
Well,
Yeah.
the other one that you mentioned is likely to come about. I don't know if it's false flag or not, or if some will be and some won't be, which are these Iranian sleeper cells. Now, we've had open borders in the United States for 4 years, millions of people crossing over.
Mhm.
And we've had, in fact, my wife at one point wanted to go over to the US to do some work, but she wasn't able to. So I did suggest to her that if you go to Mexico, you can walk across, get in
Yeah.
that way, right? Not a problem.
Yeah, just go take a ship to Panama and
That's right.
get
That's
in a
right.
caravan.
So,
Yeah.
so these sleeper cells all over Europe, in the United States, how are we going to be able to tell whether these are actual real acts of by hostile agents or by hostile agents in the form of the spy agencies?
I think it's by keeping our brain in our skulls.
Oh,
And then we'll know. I mean, again, there's been no, as far as I could see, there's been no proven case of organically emergent terrorism, domestic or foreign, that has not been organized by these damn intelligence agencies, which are directly tied to the thing that killed JFK, that killed our leaders, that sponsored Hitler's growth, that integrated with the Nazi occult inner core. There is no case of organically occurring terrorism at all. So I'd
okay.
say whatever the case may be, it probably would be that.
Let me have a go.
Yeah.
Let me have a go with my
Okay.
limited
All
knowledge
right.
and superficial knowledge, right? What about the IRA, the the Freedom Movement in Ireland, and then the Irish Republican Army later on? Then
Okay.
also, what about the ANC and the
Okay.
campaign to end apartheid in South Africa?
Okay. Well, in both of those cases, I could speak a little bit more to the IRA one. Now, the IRA originally grew out in the 1880s and 1890s around the followers of Henry C. Carey and the pro-Abraham Lincoln school of Republicans in Ireland. The followers of Henry C. Carey being, his father was a major Irish Republican leader, Matthew Carey, earlier on, and there was a big, very potent movement. I haven't looked at this research in many, many years now,
Hmm.
so some of the names are escaping me. But it began with a pro-industrial, pro-American system, pro-protective tariff fight, and it seems like the Orange Order of the Northern Ireland played a big role in undermining it, in infiltrating it, both during World War One. Even it seems even Michael Collins was playing some dangerous games. And leading up through, especially the Cold War, there was a major Gladio operation to infiltrate and radicalize a la COINTELPRO style in Ireland, these groups, in order to have infiltrators go in, carry out acts of terror, acts of kidnapping, torture, and other things, and vice versa, in order to radicalize the population, to justify more clampdown from the North. And again, the Masonic Orange Order is extremely important to bring into the calculation, as well as a lot of these leading British Gladio operatives. Again, I haven't done the work in a long time, so if we
Hmm.
want in the future, we can do a whole show on that after I go through my notes, speak to my friends who have mastered this as well. And I've got a few people that I would suggest that you actually speak to if you do want to do a show specifically on this. And P.D. Lawton, I think, actually has done some work on the infiltration of the anti-apartheid networks, which I know it had the same model to it of the Rhodesian networks that wanted to keep the colonial apartheid policy in play and work to turn the resistance into something more violent that could justify clampdowns. But I didn't do that work ever, so I can't speak to
Right,
that. But it
right.
smells of the same pedigree.
In a way, it would kind of make sense for the intelligence agencies to infiltrate those organizations, have them commit atrocities in order to have them lose support.
Yeah,
The
they do that.
last
They do
thing
that
they want to
everywhere.
deal with is an
Yeah.
honorable freedom fighting organization that's smart and rational.
Oh, yes. Yeah, exactly. It's exactly that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we have to watch out for false flags. And actually, oh,
I'll just
I
one last
can't
thing.
mention it. I can't
Okay.
mention it, but there was one a couple of years ago in the country of my birth. And the reason why I can't mention it is because it wouldn't be safe for my family back
Mm,
there,
mm, mm, mm,
right? But
mm.
they do them all over,
Yeah,
everywhere. Human beings.
it's been done for so long. I mean, Nero did it to blame the Christians as the terrorists that burned Rome and got a bunch of soft-minded Romans who didn't know any better to believe the propaganda and then support lighting Christians on fire and Roman torches and throwing them to the lions in a bloodbath because look, these are terrorists. These are subhuman terrorists out to get our freedoms as Roman citizens. And they bought that. It's an old formula.
Yeah, well, it is an old formula and it's a childish formula because I can see two kids doing it. One toddler pointing to the other toddler saying that one did it
Mm,
in order to escape punishment themselves and distract the
yeah.
attention on the other toddler.
I remember reading as well, just quickly that's a great point of the toddler doing. It's such a basic, primordial, guttural thing. And I just quickly say one
Yeah.
additional thing. I remember reading an essay a while ago making a pretty persuasive case that uh, Roman Roman intelligence operations were actually behind the zealots, the radicalization of the Jews to create the movement of cultish zealots, of basically murder assassins who would go around carrying out assassination programs throughout the early centuries of the Christian era in order to again justify more Roman clampdowns, as we saw that did mass exterminations of the Jews, leading up to things and even going beyond the battle around the destruction of the temple of the second time around, and later on the Masada cult operation. A lot of this stuff was used to just justify Roman expansionism to take an otherwise morally oriented people that had a constructive way of thinking about problem solving and working with other cultures, including Christian and Muslim, and finding a way of eliminating that problem by doing what we've been talking about. So it's
Yes.
again goes back a long time, and I love your example of the toddlers who are behaving very badly this way.
That's right. Well, that's what we all are, really. We're toddlers in big bodies, including those that lord over us, because it can be reduced to just playground squabbles,
Hmm.
but with much greater cost.
Hmm.
Matt, thank you so much. It's been an absolute education talking to you. Look forward to having you on again. And people go check out CanadianPatriot.org, also his X and his books, which you can find through his website. And this is Rich and Matt signing out. All the best. Bye bye.
Right.